Welcome to In the Zone. I am Craig Zimmerman, your host for number 41 here. We've got Sinclair royalty sitting across from me here. Welcome, Mr. Randy Young.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yep. So you're the second Young to have on the program. So your brother will critique you and versus Scott and some of that stuff.
Yeah, I'll back clean up.
Exactly. There you go. So you and I go way, way back, and we'll just talk about some of the good old days. And we know that you were born and raised in Sinclair, but give us a little history for some of the people that might not know.
Yeah, my mom still lives in the house that I grew up in, and on China Township on Indian Trail. So we grew up in China and went to school at East China Elementary, where the where everything's happening right now with the central offices. So, and then in 5th grade they built Gehring, and they divided the district, and we went to Gehring, and then St. Clair Middle School, and then high school. So all these schools you used to go to as you get older don't exist, or they're going to close.
Well, and I know that you probably have the same feeling. Some of these schools, they don't feel that old, they're not that old, and then you start backtracking in your mind what year, and it's like, oh, they're 45 years old.
Yeah.
So you can see where some of this budget money needs to go to some of these buildings because they don't last forever.
That's right. Yeah. So it's good memories. Just like we talked about where we grew up with friends that we both knew, and neighborhoods, and so we'd play wiffle ball together, and that was all good stuff. And
and then you think back and you go, well, wait a minute, that was probably 45 years ago.
At
or
least.
a little longer, right?
Yeah, at least.
Right.
Yeah.
There was sort of an art to playing that wiffle ball. The art was that Bob Williams was probably he and my brother were probably the ones that put the tape on the ball.
Yes.
And you can't put too much tape on the ball. You put too much tape on the ball, what happens?
Yeah.
Home runs.
Right. Just enough.
Just enough to get it a little bit, zing.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a good time, and on North Elizabeth.
Yep.
Yeah. North Elizabeth, Marine City.
And the funny thing is, the field that we played on is still there as a field.
It is. I rode by it the other day.
It seems so big when you're 12.
Yeah. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no bases worn, base paths worn in the field anymore.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. So you graduated in 1981.
Right.
When did you decide that you wanted to go in the funeral home business?
So growing up, I worked at my dad's and grandpa's sawmill, and my brother worked at the funeral home. So when he graduated high school, his path was in accounting. So he went to college for accounting, and at the time he was in high school, worked at the funeral home. So they needed somebody to do what he did.
Oh, okay.
Mow lawn, wash cars, and tend door. And, so they asked me if I'd like to fill his shoes. And so I said, yeah, sure. So I worked there at the funeral home at the junior and senior years, and then went to community college. Still wasn't quite sure if that was going to be my path. When you're a first generation, it's just sort of new. I guess if your father or grandfather did it, you'd probably slide into that profession a little easier. But so after a semester at the community college, I decided to make that my path. I enjoyed the work there, but didn't know if that was going to, was a career for me. But yeah, the more I got to learn about the industry and the business, the more I liked it.
Okay. Yeah. So you got into that working for Merlin Trumbull in the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Merlin had 3 places at the time, one on J Street, 306J, that sits right behind where the new theater's going up. And then one on 220 South Market in Marine City, sort of behind Fish Company. Yeah. And then the one on Sinclair Highway where we're located now. So he had 3 locations, and then when he passed in '82, his partner, Jim Buck, so I worked under both of those guys.
Finally known as Bubba.
Bubba. And so I worked with Jim, and then in '89 I bought the one location from Jim, and that's where we started. So
I just wish there was some video archives of the days of working with Jim.
Yeah, Jim he was, yeah, he would make, I guess, your job at a funeral home more interesting and more enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Jim gave me an opportunity to learn more about the business. I didn't get out of college till after Merlin died, but once I got out of college, Jim sort of showed me the ropes as far as the bookkeeping. He just let me learn as much as I wanted to learn, and which was good.
And I find it interesting from a local perspective. So you worked for Merlin, you worked for Jim, and then you come full circle. You own the business for a lot of years, and who is standing door some of the time is Mrs., as I call her, Mrs. B. Buck.
Yep.
She tells me to call her Pat.
Yep. Yeah, Pat's there. Growing up, I say growing up, but like from 16 years on, you were there a lot, so you got to know their kids and her parents and her brother Ross, and so you just became part of the funeral family, and got to, it was a big family.
Yeah.
You know?
And back in those days, some people don't remember it because it's so long forgotten, but a lot of times the funeral homes ran the ambulances.
They did back in the 70s. That was just before my time. They had ambulance services and towers, and the guys would spend the nights at the funeral home for any calls that would come in. They had a little radio tower.
Yep.
And, I only heard about those days.
Yeah.
But there was some, stories that I talked to. Two of my neighbors used to work at the funeral home during the ambulance days, and so I've heard some stories from them.
This is a separate thing that I think of when you talk about the days that back then was my brother bought a car from Jim, and you probably washed it at one point. You can't remember what you had for lunch yesterday, but you can remember this was about a mid-'70s Mercury Marquis powder blue. It
was blue, yeah.
and it was clean as a whistle, right?
Blue is their color.
Yeah.
Merlin liked blue cars, so it was different. It wasn't never seemed to be sky blue or navy blue. I always called it Merlin blue because he just got some special color, sort of like the color of your backdrop here.
Exactly.
It stood out. It stood out.
If you saw that car today, you would recognize it.
I would.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah. So give me a little background on your mother, your father, and your siblings.
My dad and had the sawmill out towards Richmond, Columbus Township, little burg called Snyderville, out near Emil the Buffaloes. So, growing up as kids, we worked there, my brother and I, and then my mom, she was a Cottrell originally, but she grew up in China Township on Sinclair Highway. My dad grew up in Adair. And then I've got an older brother who's retired from Waterhouse Coopers, lives in Florida. And then a sister that's retired from teaching in Memphis. Okay. And then my youngest sister she runs the Chamber of Commerce in Buellton, California. So she's been doing that for quite a few years.
Okay.
But
so was there ever a thought that one of the family men, will say, would take over the business from your dad, or?
Dad and Grandpa had the business for 60 years out there.
Right.
They both started working with Bewers back in the day, but once my brother went to college, he had his path set. He knew what he was going to do. Okay. I wasn't quite sure.
Sure.
And so I had that conversation with Dad, and I said, who's going to do this, if I don't? And
Right.
he said, I think if you enjoy your work at the funeral home, he said, you don't know what direction a lumber business is going to go. And so he was honest and upfront about it.
Good answer, but he ran it for a lot of years longer.
Yeah. Grandpa died in '84, and Dad kept it going till he died in 2019. So,
right.
Yeah, it was an old staple out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I can remember back in the day when we used to get sawdust from there for the meat market, for running the smokehouses and wood, and we had some of your relatives would pick out wood from your dad, or the Schweihofer twins.
Lawrence and Louie.
There you go.
Yeah. They. I remember your your family coming out and getting sawdust out there. Yeah, all the butcher shops seem to come out to the sawmill and get the sawdust.
Oh yeah, exactly. And then, as typical, like you talk about you doing the jobs in, say, the funeral home of washing the cars or sweeping up or whatever. Guess who unloaded that tall, big pickup truck full of sawdust? one of the kids, right?
One of the kids. Yeah.
So that's how it happened.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
You know.
Those are, that's all good stuff. It's where you just pick up your work ethic right from the ground floor.
Yep.
Watch your dad and your grandpa work hard together, and all their staff, and
Yep. So you went. I'm guessing. I'm guessing you went to Wayne State.
Right.
For mortuary science.
Right.
And how long of a program was that for you?
For me, it was. Let's see. Well, it was 3 years. I went 4 because I sort of broke it up. I'd work while I went to college. So, and then my last year, I went to Wayne State. I lived in a basement of a funeral home. You would get a list from the college of funeral homes that would take on students to live there closer, because you get students from the UP and all over Michigan. So if you want to live closer to the college, you could do that. And so I lived in Centerline at Ford Funeral Home. They were like at Van Dyke and about 10 and a half
I know
mile.
exactly where it is.
Yep. And so, I again, worked under some Norbert Ford. He owned the funeral home, and Dan Zolik, Dave Shivas, just good directors. Learned other facets of the trade, and just at a different pace down there. It's a little busier. You get down towards the city, and I picked up good practices, picked up some lifetime friendships down there, and just
because they're generally family businesses.
Yeah, Norbert, he started his business, if I understand it right. He was a trade embalmer, and then just started his own funeral home there. So he was a first generation. But a lot of funeral homes weren't first generation back then. Right. So when you got through school, you had to wait for the owner. Maybe he's going to pass it to a son, or so you didn't know where you sort of stood in line. I was fortunate with Jim to be able to work right in. I think it was 26 when I bought the funeral home. So again, Jim gave me that opportunity. So
now you've gone through quite a bit of looks like growth. You built a new funeral home, which again seems new, but it's probably 20 years old.
Yeah, it's 22. It was 22, so it was in 2000 this month. Yeah.
Now, how long did you contemplate doing that? Was it a quick decision or a long, drawn-out decision?
It was sort of long, a little longer. Yeah, it took a couple of years. We had prints back and forth, and we thought about renovating the old place, and then we contemplated building new. And so as we chewed on that for a while, it probably took a year and a half or so, and then probably another year for construction. And so we sat on that for a while. It was sort of a big decision.
Well, especially when you look at a small hometown business, and it's not every day you see new funeral homes being built.
Right.
And it's a big nut to crack as far as taking a mortgage on and the rest of it.
Right, yeah.
But if you look back 22 years, it's probably the best thing you ever did.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it gave us just better space to work with. You could you didn't have to sort of reimagine old space.
Right.
You didn't have to move walls or something. You could just start fresh. And at the time, I remember when we built, we had one room was going to be a smoking room. There was always smoking rooms, and so we ended up changing that. By the time we started, the plan that was done, it made it more of a children's room, and smoke outside.
Right.
So we didn't anticipate that, but worked out good.
Well, and that helped you.
Yes.
The industry in the long run, when you think about it, you don't have to clean your drapes every 3-4 months. And
absolutely.
Yada,
you put
yada.
new drapes up, fresh paint.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now, well, and the other thing too is, especially in the small town funeral business, most of them were in old homes.
Right.
So you're pretty hooked into not taking out too many walls because of supporting structures and beams and different things like that. So, you couldn't have had what you have now in an old house unless you really did redesign the whole thing, probably.
Yeah, and by the time you're done,
You're close to about the same, probably.
Probably about the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I got to believe that when you look at the amount of funerals you do now compared to 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago, the numbers have gone steadily up because of the facility you have.
Yeah, I think the parking helps and the facility. Yeah, and the area's grown a bit. And
Yep.
so that all adds to it. Yeah.
So how many years total then have you been in business for yourself?
33.
33 years?
33. Yeah.
Okay.
33. Yeah.
And we've got the next generation in place.
Right. Yeah. Scott's been doing well. All this, and my nephew Connor, he works with us. He graduated when Scott did, so he's a licensed director. So and Tim's there, Tim
Yep.
Disselrath. So yeah, all the fellas are there, and they all do a good job. I think. If they don't, we'd like to know.
There you go. And then again, not memorizing the dates or the years, you bought out the competitor in town.
Yeah, and
Frederick's.
Frederick's Funeral Home, and again, that's was a third generation business. So that's been there a long time, and that was in '05.
Okay.
And I had an opportunity there. Talked to Jim, and Jim was ready to make that transition.
Sure.
Not to retire, but because Jim, we're fortunate to have Jim stay with us for quite a few years after that. So. But yeah, that was sort of interesting in the area when you look at the old family names.
Right.
The Frederick's family in Sinclair. There were 3 generations of Frederick's family in Marine City. Had
Right.
a place there for 3 or 4 generations, and I don't know how there were Bowers in both towns too.
Right.
And there was Bauer and Son and Bauer and
Rose.
Greenway, and then you go to Marine City, it was Bauer and Rose.
Right.
So I don't know if they were related, the Bowers, but
It's interesting small town stuff.
but
It's
they were cousins. I know the Fredericks were.
My brother tells stories about Bernard in a fond memory of some of the jovial things Bernard said and did over the years. And for some reason, a certain amount of the people that run facilities like that tend to be characters.
Yeah.
Not all.
Yep.
We won't classify you there, but Bernard was one of those guys.
Yeah. There were a lot of stories about Bernard, especially how he would sing.
Yeah.
And he could really sing well.
Yeah.
I guess he sang at my great grandfather's funeral in 1953. My aunt would always remind me of that. It was, and then was it? Sandy Markle told me a story not long ago. How Bernard would be invited to their maybe Thanksgiving, one of their family dinners, and he would always bring beans, and they'd ask him, "Did you bake those beans, Bernard?" He says, "No, but I made the arrangements." He'd say. So.
Oh, he had all kinds of one-liners like
Yeah.
that, right?
So I'd met him a handful of times at Gord's, but
He was known to hang out at those places a few times.
sure, he's retired. Yeah, he's.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about your wife and children.
My wife Lisa, she helps us there. She's at the office every day.
She's the boss.
She is the boss, and so she's we were married just 31 years a week ago, and she was a Swiover in St. Clair.
Now, did you date in high school?
No.
Okay.
Once.
Okay.
Once, yeah. We dated once in high school. It was a double date, and a friend of mine was dating her friend, and he needed somebody to go with him because his friend wouldn't. His friend's parents, her parents said you can't go alone. So he asked me if I'd go with them with her friend. So, and it was Lisa. But our families had went back a long time. Just our parents,
Sure.
and, grandparents knew one another.
Now, what are Lisa's parents' names?
Bob and Karen.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and Karen was she was a Kirchner from Marine City,
Okay.
and Easton Kirchner. He had a store in Marine City years ago, I guess. And but yeah, it's interesting. You trace your roots back. I always say you're going to end up in Marine City or Adair, one or the other.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, my dad's side, that's the same. The Beebe family, his mother was a Beebe. And so yeah, it does. My mom's on the Cottrell side, so.
And what Cottrell would have, her parents' names would have been?
He'd have been Joe,
Okay.
Joe Cottrell. But he passed in '71, so. But he had a number of brothers and sisters.
Where did they grow up? Your mother?
She grew up there in China Township on Sinclair Highway.
Okay.
But her father, I don't know the street they grew up in, Marine City. But
I'm going to have to do a little checking out. You know, it's like you want to connect some dots there. There's so many Cottrells around.
yep,
And probably what will happen is I'll ask a few people and they'll go, oh, I didn't know that was her brother, you know, or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep. We talk about that once in a while. Jim Cottrell and I talk about that. And he says, I'm going to have to check that out.
Right.
So, yeah.
Out of all the people, I would have thought he would have done that already because
Yeah.
he's into that type of stuff.
They're all hooked in, I think.
Yeah.
I know they're related some way.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, and then the kids, Scott was here with you a week or two ago, and and then my son Nolan, he takes care of things at the pet crematory, which we've had for about 8-9 years.
Okay.
And then my daughter Olivia, she was attending SC4 up till COVID,
Okay.
and now she's changed her major, so and then she's working every day. But
And how old would she be now?
She's 22.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 22, you're young enough at that point to still find your way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She's working every day, but it's just she's just trying to find that
Still live at home?
career. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. She's still with us, so we're sort of homebodies. So
Okay.
we sort of like having the kids close
Yeah.
by, if they want to be close by.
Right. Now, let's talk about the pet crematory. How did you come to this thought of starting that business?
We were thinking about it for a while. We had heard there were some funeral homes in Ohio, Indiana area that were doing that. So I went and visited a couple. We visited one in Texas on a vacation we were on, and that's not something your kids want to do when they're on vacation.
Yeah. Hold on, kids, we're going for a ride.
So anyway, we sort of just did a little homework on it. We thought, and we were pet owners, and we just sort of thought that would be a good fit for us. There was nothing like that locally in the county. All the vets that we had spoke with, they send their pets out of county. So we just thought something more personal and in
Sure.
people's backyards might.
I'm guessing you probably have to go somewhere to Mount Clemens, the closest one?
Yeah, Mount Clemens,
Okay.
and then and
Nothing in
some-
Port Huron?
No,
Okay.
and some of the vets were they're going 2 counties away.
Okay.
So I was surprised how far.
So how long have you had that business?
I think that's about 8 or 9 years.
And how is that going according to what you thought?
It's busier than we thought. I
Okay.
thought it would just be a nice extension of what we did at the funeral home as far as being able to offer another service.
Sure.
But as time goes on and word gets
Name
around,
gets out, right.
people like the thought of just having things close to home and
Sure.
dealing with someone local.
Okay.
So it's sort of I guess if you can see a mom and pop cremation place,
Yeah.
it's sort of that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mentors. Give me some names of your mentors. Now I know one, obviously, 1 or 2.
Yeah,
and
well,
you can mention those.
yeah, that's a lot of the fellas that I worked under, like Merlin and Jim,
Yep.
and then I served my apprenticeship under Tom Durkee,
Okay.
and Tom, he's been director at Gilbert's for about over 40 years now.
Okay.
The fellas at Ford's that I worked with at Ford Funeral Home, everybody's got a different skill set, and you learn a little bit of something
Sure.
different, then you develop your own. So I was fortunate to work with all those different people. And of course, your parents, they're
Sure.
always there
Yep.
through
Thick and thin, good or
thick
bad.
and thin, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, your business tends to be one that is still dominated by a lot of local businesses. Now, some conglomerates have come out and bought, but
Right.
they're generally in the metropolitan areas. Generally.
Right.
So you've got a nice little niche here, St. Clair, Marine City, up and down the River District. Do you see any changes as far as, do the conglomerates come looking this way? Do they make calls on local, small town?
I don't know if they do too much. Years ago, they did that in Port Huron.
Yeah.
With Smith Funeral Home.
Yep.
And then about 15 years later, the Smith family purchased it back. So, but yeah, that's definitely going on more in the St. Clair shores.
Sure.
All over the state. But
are the big ones still acquiring? I know it seemed like 15, 20 years ago you saw it a lot. Sterling Heights, St. Clair Shores, Grosse Pointe. Do you still see that? Is there another cycle going on with that, do you think?
It seems like it. I'd heard there was a group from Canada purchasing pet crematories.
Okay.
So, I mean, that was... So, yeah, there's always, just like in so many different businesses, it just seems like the...
Private equity gets involved,
the big
pools
fish.
money,
Yeah.
tries to scale it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know if it's nice to be able to do what I do in the community that I grew up in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I've heard a lot of guys say, well, I'll never sell out to the big guys, and they have,
Right.
But they're in the bigger
Big
areas,
Yep.
So, and who knows what kind of dollars they're flashing down there, but.
My guess would be when you get into the Farmington Hills, the St. Clair Shores type of areas, in some situations, if they're ready for doing something in the business, it seems like you join them or you fight them.
Right.
Especially in the city where people don't know each other. When you have a funeral in St. Clair, a huge amount of the people walking in that door.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much in the city.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that when I years ago went to Centerline. I went from, like you say, knowing a lot of the people that came in the door to not knowing anybody.
Right. Right.
So that's sort of, because they asked me to stay on when I was with them at Ford, and I thought, well, that took something away from it for me.
Sure.
Being able to do what we do for the people you know and you grew up with, that was a special part that I enjoyed. So.
Yeah. You've got another little business, some batting academy type of business. Now, is that your business or is that Scott's business?
It's just the kids take care of the Scott.
Okay.
He just we just have the space there for him to use. So and they keep themselves busy there, and there have been teams occasionally come in and use it for a winter. They all get a date. So I don't know. I think things might be starting to line up for this year, but yeah, that's
all three kids involved in that?
No, just Scott and Olivia.
Okay.
Yeah, Olivia does her lessons, and then Scott takes care of the scheduling of and Lisa does too. They take care of the scheduling of the teams if they want it on a Monday night from 7 to 8 or whatever it might be. But and then there's some little league teams that come in, and so it's
fills up the calendar, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, they come in and it's good. It's good for the kids.
So for people that may not know what we're talking about, Scott does mostly batting clinic, private tutoring, if you will?
Yeah, Scott does catching and batting.
Okay.
Yep, hitting. I think he helps some kids with pitching. He knows enough about the mechanics. He's looked at enough pitchers to sort of see some of those things. And then Olivia is primarily pitching because she pitched
Girls
through
softball.
school and so the fast pitch. So she keeps steady there in the evenings.
So with all this stuff going on, what do you do in your spare time? Is there such a thing?
Well, it's sort of changed up now when you're done chasing kids to games and going to when all their events are done. But so I don't know, we're pretty simple. We just like sticking around home and hitting the golf course once in a while with the kids, and I don't know.
Who's the best golfer out of the family right now?
Scott is right now.
There was no hesitation there.
No, 2 years ago I'd have chewed on that one for a while, but he's the golf bug bit him. The boys played modified for a little while, and but last year there was just, COVID sort of sucked the modified right out of the area. Other than Marine City's the only. So my son Nolan played down there, and they had a good time. You know, that's a good league down there. They're still keeping it going. So
that's a league you played in.
Kudos, kudos to them. You know, we played with Gorge for
a long time.
Made lifetime friendships through those leagues down there, and and then with Gars, with the Maroons and John Ladensack, and we're sort of just getting together a team now. You know, so we did that for quite a few years too.
Yep. And then what will happen is the next, and I'm not putting a date on it, but the next 5 or 10 years will be the grandkids thing. You know, that'll come up.
Yeah. Yep. That'll be the next.
So that'll be the next thing, and then if you have granddaughters, then your daughter will teach them how to pitch, and if it's grandsons, the boys will get involved.
We'll see. Yeah. Okay. That'll be coming up soon, hopefully.
Okay. Yeah, good to hear from you. Good to talk to you. There's a lot going on. We know that. One thing that I find interesting, and I've said this before to a few people, in St. Clair specifically, and you've got them working with you, for you, but you've got the Schweihofer side of the family, which is one of the biggest families in St. Clair.
Yeah.
You've got Tim from the Disselrath side. Right?
Right.
And then your nephew as well. So you cover most of the bases in St. Clair.
Yeah. Good groups of people. Yeah, there's a lot of, we're lucky, it's a good area.
Oh yeah.
Just whether it's Marine City, St. Clair, there's just a lot of old history, and we're fortunate to be part of it, a little part of it, and grow up in it. And like we talked about earlier, the older we get, we're getting to be the storytellers. Yes. So we got to try to keep our ears open and learn what we can.
And it's always fun, and it's neat that if you go to something, whether it's in Marine City or whether it's in St. Clair, you're going to run into somebody whether you played softball with them with Gorge, or your son was on the state championship baseball team and their son was on it. So there's just common ground there everywhere, just about.
Yeah. It's small town stuff.
Yeah, and then it's like in some of my interviews, whether it's Fred Shaw or Tony Monty or some of these people, I mean, they can't walk more than 5 feet without knowing somebody. Yeah. And you're probably the same, especially being in the funeral business.
Oh yeah. It is. It's small town stuff. It's nice to be able to know you got a friend close by wherever you're at.
Yep. Well, thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
If you know of anybody, if you know of anybody else to be interviewed, or if it was that painful, send your enemy my way, right? We put the phone number up there so that if somebody calls, and we've gotten a few calls. If you know of anybody, just call the phone number. If I don't answer, leave a message and we'll get in touch with you. So we'll thank the mayor of St. Clair here, the unofficial mayor, Randy Young.
Very unofficial.
So that's it for number 41, and we'll be back at you. Thank you.